Greetings, Sentinels fans! It's been a while since I talked about the Cauldron, so let's go back there and talk about the hero Cypher. A note before I begin. I am aware that the Sentinels modding community has been putting work into updating the Cauldron decks for Definitive Edition. I haven't really been paying too much attention to that though. I don't know how far along they are, if any of the decks are considered complete or what. If I recall correctly, I don't think Matthew Bishop is involved in the updating process, and I think the art for the cards are going to stay as they are. I will hold off on actual comparisons of the decks until Definitive Edition is a little further along. For now, let's look at our Cyborg. Cypher is another take on Captain Cosmic's deal. He gives heroes buffs by directly giving the hero a card that boosts something. His spin though is that his are equipment and that he has 5 of them in his deck as opposed to Cosmic's buttload. There being so few means that they should be easily summoned. They're not necessarily, but we'll get to that later. Each of these augments are pretty universally useful. But like with any support, the effectiveness of any boost you give is dependent on the hero you give it to. For example, I imagine Argent Adept would make much more effective use of Fusion Aug than Bunker. And since I just mentioned it, let's start with Fusion Aug. When played, it is played next to a hero of your choice. That hero that has this card next to them is considered augmented for the purposes of other cards in Cypher's deck. Each of the augment cards have that text. They all might as well essentially give the heroes the keyword augmented. This particular augment lets the hero use an additional power during their power phase. Build your hero up a little bit, and a little extra power will be nice. Retinal Aug allows an extra card play per play phase, which is good for anyone. Vascular Aug has their hero gain a hit point at the end of their turn. Muscle Aug increases all damage dealt by that hero by 1, and Dermal Aug reduces damage dealt to that hero by 1. So basically, all of them are useful for nearly every hero, though it is a little off-putting that it seems like he's just jamming the Augs into other heroes' bodies. Like sure, Necro is a necromancer, so having a third of his torso missing is probably just another Tuesday for him. But I doubt Unity wanted to sacrifice an eye for this. Anyways, there is also nothing stopping you from putting more than one augment on a single hero, so you can build up one hero pretty strong if you really want to, though the cards we will go into later encourage spreading them out. However, you can even switch the Augs around to new people. Neural Interface will probably be your main way of doing this, as it is an ongoing that gives Cypher a power to move one augment to a new hero. Say if Cypher himself took a big beating and thus needs healing. You could just take the Vascular Aug from Cricket, who was just using it for the augmented status, and Cypher can start healing. Or if Harpy lost her setup, you can give her Muscle Aug to Chrono Ranger to keep the damage up while Harpy focuses on building back up. Neural Interface also allows Cypher to draw a couple cards. But if you don't want to spend a power to move an Aug, you can use Cyborg Blaster or Cyborg Punch. Blaster allows you to move an augment, and then an augmented hero deals target 2 damage. Punch can move an augment, and an augmented hero can deal a target 1 damage and then draw a card. Both of these are honestly kind of disappointing amount of damage for using a card play. Most times when a one-shot is damaging, it is sure to deal 2 damage and have another effect on top of that. Otherwise, they generally do at least 4 damage. While it can affect things, I don't believe moving Augs around is a significant enough effect to justify a card play, so I'd say that these cards aren't really doing enough. There is also Backup Plan, which is a temporary ongoing that can destroy itself when a non-hero card enters play. And then you may move any augments in play to any hero you please, before healing all augmented heroes 2 points. Now my favorites of Cypher's cards are the ones that produce big effects for augmented heroes. One of which is Networked Attack, which lets all augmented heroes use a power right now. Having 3 or more heroes using a power at once can be very satisfying. There is also Electro-Optical Cloak, which makes augmented heroes immune to damage until this card destroys itself on Cypher's next turn. There is, I guess, Nanite Surge as well, which in addition to letting Cypher draw and play a card, heals any augmented heroes an amount of damage based on the amount of Augs they have. To my knowledge, this is the only one of Cypher's cards that encourages stacking the augments up, since, as you can see, Networked Attack and the Cloak both encourage spreading the Augs around. But then we get to what I think is a bit of a weird choice, the cards that destroy augments. Cyber Defense lets you destroy as many augments as you like, and then deal all non-heroes damage equal to the amount destroyed by this. This is a bit similar to Omicron X's Singularity, but restricted to the augments. That said, it's not going to build up to an exceedingly big hit, as Cypher has 5 Augs total. Usually. There is a variant that changes this. And there is Cyber Integration, which lets you destroy augments and heals 3 hit points to the hero it was attached to. So theoretically, you can heal a hero 3 points by blowing up 1 aug, heal that same hero 15 hit points by blowing up all 5 augs if they were all attached to them, or heal the whole team 3 hit points if each one of them has an aug. Now this might seem nice until you start thinking about the action economy here. As a general rule with this character, he can usually only get 1 augment in play per turn. So healing of 3 on 1 hero will cost 2 plays, therefore cost 2 turns. If you want all 5 augs for massive healing, that's 6 plays, and thus 6 turns. Now, if you do spend your first play to give Cypher the Retinal Aug, you double his card play output, thus reducing the turn cost to 3. This still starts looking less useful when you compare it to other heroes who can heal. Now, most of the time that is self-healing or one-off healing or both, but many heroes can at least do something. And some do that something very well. If you want a more useful healer in this way, go to Malachi at least. Now, healer is not Cypher's main job, as I'd say his primary job is buff. So I'm not going to harp on this quite as much as when I did the action economy calculations for Enhanced Edition Expatriates, but these complaints can also count for cyber defense as well. 6 card plays to deal 5 points of area damage is a bit underwhelming. Now of course, with so much importance on the augments, it helps to have a way to acquire them. Option 1 is rapid prototyping, which lets him draw 2 cards and play any amount of augments from his hand. However, since the augs only take up about 1/8 of the deck, you are unlikely to have a lot of them. And hey, you may end up with a starting hand with 3 augs and prototyping, then draw the other 2 augs with the effect, allowing you to get all 5 of them out on turn 1. It's possible. Unlikely, but possible. Usually I use this card if I want to get an aug out and get a little extra card draw with the same play. Next is Heuristic Algorithm, which is a discover effect. Go through your deck until you find an augment, put it into play. Shuffle the rest of the cards back into your deck. You also have the option to put the aug directly into your trash. Not sure why you would want to do that, but the option is there. And if there are no augments in your deck to discover, then this card will let you draw 2 cards. Option 3, Initiated Upgrade. This is a summon effect. You can grab an aug of your choice from your deck or your trash and put it right into play. This card also lets you draw a card after. And if a bunch of augs have blown up, you can use Rebuild to Succeed to bring back 2 of them. 1 aug is taken from the trash and put into your hand, and another aug is taken from the trash and put into play, with the added benefit that the hero you gave the augment to can play a card right now. Well, you ask, are there any of Cypher's cards that don't deal with the augs? Well, even including the character cards, the answer is 1. Hacking Program gives Cypher a power where he can deal himself 2 damage to destroy an ongoing or environment card. A fair enough card. Now, out of all the cards in his deck, the only ones I really like are the augments themselves. The boosts they give are pretty nice, but there is no guarantee that you will get access to the augs. It's the bricking problem again, and you know what that means? Time for math! So, start of the game. Out of a 40 card deck, 5 of them are the augments themselves, and 7 more from summoning from the deck. That's 12 cards to get an augment in play, 3 more to grab from the trash. That's 15 cards, a little short of half the deck. As a reminder, Enhanced Edition Absolute Zero has 16 cards for the purposes of grabbing modules. Cypher also has the 3 copies of Interface, the 3 copies of Prototyping, and the 2 copies of Surge to accelerate card draw, much more than what Enhanced Edition Absolute Zero does. The difference here, though, is everything else. Absolute Zero has cards that allow him to do things even if he isn't set up. It's not optimal, but he can still function. Compare with Cypher, in which every single one of his cards, save for the hacking card, either looks to get an augment or requires an augment in play in order to work. You need to have at least 1 for so many of these cards to work. Even more rough when you finally get 1 aug in play, but the only thing you have in your hand are cards that blow up augs. So the only thing you can do is go back to square 1 in exchange for a meh effect. Essentially, Cypher bricks less often than Absolute Zero, but he bricks a lot harder. Not even the character powers get away from requiring augments. Base Cypher can use a power to give an augmented hero a card draw. On top of being a bit boring, it's only useful if you have augs out. Being able to choose the hero who gets the card draw is nice, but if the effect of the aug is better for a different hero, you may not get the option you want. Character card number 2, First Response, has Cypher deal 1 target an amount of damage equal to the amount of augs in play. Again, reliant on having Augs in play. But if you have a bunch out, you can at least get good damage going. So a bit more fun than the card draw. It's kinda like Visionary Unleashed in a way, allowing for good build-up over time. This third variant is an interesting one though. Swarming Protocol can play one of his cards face down next to any hero. This face down card acts as an augment with no text, essentially counting as a blank aug for use with your cards. Then Cypher draws a card. This version of him makes much more use of those cards that are dependent on the amount of augs in play, allowing him to actually get some high numbers on those cards. And this is the only one that can guarantee an augment on a hero on turn 1, even if it does nothing by itself. This is a great way to get Cypher himself to do interesting things, rather than have all of his usefulness be derived from his buffs. You can more easily use the big one-shots that make all the difference, since you don't need to search for the augs with text, just drop a generic augment. For Cypher, the issue is lack of effective play a lot of the time. He can run into breaking problems where he can quickly run out of useful things to do. The cards of his that are effective require a lot of investment to get to that point, and in some cases also lose all that progress. The buffs themselves are fine, but a lot of the interactions with the augs leave a lot to be desired. And I believe that about covers it. I hope you found this talk interesting. Take care, friends. Okay, first I want to show off my shirt.